Most companies have a security policy folder nobody opens. It was written once, maybe by a consultant, maybe copy-pasted from a template, and it's been collecting digital dust ever since. Today we're talking about how to build a security policy program that auditors respect and that employees actually follow. Let's start with why policies matter. Beyond just checking a compliance box, policies are the foundation that every other control points back to. Your SAST findings, your access reviews, your incident response process, all of it traces back to a policy statement somewhere. Auditors for SOC2, ISO 27001 or PCI will ask for policy first and evidence second. A good policy set also protects leadership. It shows that reasonable care was documented and followed. The most common failure mode is policies that are either too generic, like we will protect data, or too prescriptive, naming specific tools that change every couple of years and instantly make the policy outdated. So what does a practical policy set actually look like for a mid-sized company? Let's walk through the core set. First, the information security policy. This is the umbrella document, ideally approved by the board or executive leadership. It sets the overall tone and commitment. Second, the acceptable use policy. This covers how employees are expected to use company systems, devices and accounts. Third, the access control policy. This answers the question, who can see what and who approves changes, typically owned by IT or the identity team. Fourth, the data classification and handling policy. This defines what counts as sensitive data and how it must be handled at each classification level. Fifth, the secure development policy. This ties directly into the secure development life cycle, which we'll cover in detail in another episode. Sixth, the vendor and third-party risk policy. This governs how you assess and monitor the security of vendors and partners. Seventh, the incident response policy. This defines roles, escalation paths, and communication during a security incident. Eighth, the asset management policy. You can't protect what you don't know you have, and this policy ensures you have a living inventory. Ninth, the encryption and key management policy. This covers how data is protected at rest and in transit, and how encryption keys are managed and rotated. And 10th, the business continuity and disaster recovery policy. This ensures the organization can keep operating or recover quickly after a disruption. Now let's talk about documentation structure that actually survives an audit. It helps to understand the difference between four types of documents. A policy answers what and why. A standard sets the bar, the specific requirement. A procedure lays out the step-by-step process. And a guideline is a suggestion or best practice that isn't strictly mandatory. Version control matters too. Every policy should have an annual review at minimum, plus triggered reviews after major incidents or significant changes to the business. There should also be a clear approval trail showing who signed off and when. This matters for ISO 27001's clause on leadership commitment. But more importantly, it shows the policy was actually reviewed by someone with authority. A simple but powerful tool here is a policy register. This is a one-page index that lists every policy. its owner, the last review date, and the next review date. It sounds basic, but very few companies actually maintain one. And auditors love it. Now, let's talk about the most common mistakes companies make with their policy programs. Mistake 1, writing policies that don't match reality. If your policy says multi-factor authentication is required everywhere, but you have legacy systems that can't support it, you now have a documented violation of your own policy. The fix is either to close that gap technically or to formally document the exception. Which brings us to mistake 2, having no exception process at all. Every policy needs a documented time-bound exception or waiver process, with someone formally accepting the risk. Without this, every gap becomes a policy violation rather than a managed risk. Mistake 3, policies that are written once and never connected to actual controls or evidence. The policy exists, but nobody can point to how it's actually being enforced or verified. And mistake 4, no tracking of employee acknowledgement. If employees haven't formally acknowledged reading and understanding the policy, it's much harder to enforce or to demonstrate compliance. A practical tip to tie all of this together is to build a simple traceability matrix. For each policy clause, map it to a specific control, the evidence source that proves the control is working, and the person who owns it. This single document becomes incredibly useful during audits and risk assessments. To wrap up, policies are the backbone of your security program, but only if they're living documents tied to real practices, reviewed regularly, and connected to evidence. This is exactly the kind of gap that RiskRecap helps close. You keep running your business and we help turn your policy program into something that holds up under audit and actually guides your team day to day. If your policy folder hasn't been opened in over a year, that's worth the conversation.